name's Alan Sakyan.
I'm Kevin Whittinghill, and you guys are at...
Eureka!
Awesome. Excellent. So Eureka's a science, interactive science comedy show.
One part science lecture, one part comedic bantering, and third part audience engagement for cool prizes.
That's right. So our guest scientist will ask you questions, and if you get them right, you'll get a prize. So let's test that out right now. Was it raining today? Yes. No, it was sunny. That's called an alternative fact. And we won't be doing that tonight. It's all real facts, evidence-based.
I always like to say for all the newbies that are here, Eureka's mission is to make science relatable, educational, and entertaining. Does that sound like a fun mission?
Yeah. Sweet.
Yeah.
So if somebody gets the answer right or close enough, and our guest scientist will determine that, we all yell out Eureka, and they get a fun prize.
Yeah, and we have these new cool Eureka shirts that we're wearing right now.
We do.
And wait a second. What a cool quote on the back. Kevin, what does it say?
It says, I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious. Some guy named Einstein.
Yes.
Don't know who that is.
Such
Such
coolness.
I think he's on Instagram. Cool. Should we start this puppy up?
Let's start the puppy
Sweet.
up.
Our comedians. Let's start with Mark Smalls. Come out here, man. Give it up for
Mark
Smalls. Mark is a great, very funny comedian here in the Bay. This is his second time doing the show. He was loved so much.
Love this show.
And now our next comic, Justin Lucas. Come on down, buddy.
Yeah, Justin.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He's got the coffee.
Hello, check.
And-
Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome.
All right.
There you go.
And our guest scientist for the evening is Dr. Joon Yun, and he has been on Eureka before, and he was teaching about homeostatic capacity on the last show. And this time, Joon's gonna be talking population stabilization, and his bio makes me feel so bad about myself. So he's president of Palo Alto Investors. The firm has $1.8 billion in assets invested in healthcare. He received his bachelor's from Harvard, MD from Duke, and he's clinically trained and board certified in radiology. Introducing Dr. Joon Yun.
Everybody.
Dr. Joon. Dr. Joon Yun.
Thanks for having me back, and thanks to all of you for being here. I think we ended last time talking about how aging is going to have a dramatic effect, or the stopping aging is going to have a dramatic effect on human life. And one of the questions, inevitably that comes up is, well, isn't the Earth going to be full? So today we're going to talk about the social science of headcount. Something that small, such as a headcount, can have dramatic effect on where the world goes, and it will have dramatic effect on your future as well. So we're going to talk about that tonight.
Sounds cool.
Quick question. It said that you was it graduated from Harvard and then trained in Stanford? Is that what?
I went to medical school in between, yes.
In between, yes. I think everybody's
On his downtime, that's
got
what he
it.
did.
Okay, very smart.
I love how his bio is like, graduated from Harvard, donated a bunch of money. My
You're
bio,
really smart, doctor.
my bio is like, placed third in a comedy competition.
Yeah, in the East Bay.
Open for someone kind of not that famous. Anyway, let's get to that smart shit,
Yeah,
Doc.
let's get to that smart shit. Yeah.
So, Joon, what is the significance of headcount? Why is that an important topic to talk about?
Well, the headcount on the planet is something we don't experience and think about because it's sort of out there, but it drives so much of what's going on in the economy, in technology, in terms of resources, healthcare. So that's the reason to talk about it tonight. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Doc.
So I'm going to ask 10 questions tonight, and the first question is...
7.
Okay.
First question is...
Find the quarter.
What is a Malthusian catastrophe? Anybody?
That's when one of those bike wheel breaks off.
We saw a lot of hands go up. We're going to come right here first.
So that would be when the population outstrips the amount of resources or productivity on the planet, and we would therefore be in a really bad situation.
You are correct.
Eureka! We got goodies in here, dude.
Congratulations.
We want you to not necessarily outstrip the population. Here's some glow-in-the-dark condoms, man.
Thomas
idea-
Robert Malthus.
Malthus. yes.
Yeah.
So he published a set of books in the 1800s predicting a calamity for the human species based on population growth ruining everything. We're going to overconsume everything. We're going to run out of water, run out of resources. There'll be scarcity, there'll be famine, there'll be war. So he set off an alarm call for the world to worry about population explosion. Probably the most significant author to describe this in our generation is Paul Ehrlich, who's a Stanford professor. In 1968, remember 1968, there was something called the Cold War. We were terrified about the bomb. And so he wrote a book called Population Bomb.
The Population Bomb, directed by Michael Bay in 2019.
This book was so popular, it was the big bestseller in that era. And so many people that are in leadership roles today read the book. If you think about what we started doing after 1968, we started thinking about war policy. War for oil really has its roots in the ideas of Paul Ehrlich, where, oh my God, we're going to run out of everything, so we got to go secure our oil, right? So this book had a huge influence on political theory, military theory, economic theory. And he's not the only one. Since then, lots of people have been writing about the fact that Malthusian catastrophe is going to ruin everything for all of us, right? And over the years, I mean, this is in the 90s.
That's something my mom used to tell me.
My mom would say the same. My dad would say the same thing, except without the save the planet.
Okay, yeah. It's like, fuck the planet, fuck yourself.
It was just they crossed that whole thing out.
Yeah.
So I mean, we've gotten used to thinking that we are the problem, right? Humans are the problem. Humans are ugly. Humans are causing all these problems. That's the narrative that's out there. They're very dystopian, right? So the prediction, and this is out of, I think it was out of the United Nations.
UN, yeah.
UN, yeah. They're predicting population on the planet by 2100 will be 15 billion people.
This is at the highest growth curve.
Yeah, the highest growth curve. This is the most aggressive forecast. 15 billion people. You know how many people we have today? 7.49 billion. Right.
I just feel it's just like a lot more people I have to unfollow on Facebook, essentially.
So they're projecting 15 billion by 2100, yeah?
Yes. Or 1 billion less than who showed up at the inauguration.
Okay.
But so
Aha, look at this.
He's also a
He
comedian.
sometimes sits over here.
shit.
He sometimes sits over
We got a
here.
comedy show here, man.
all right, so this is a TED Talk from just a few years ago. I mean, everybody's still predicting population explosion. We're going to run out of everything. This is a talk called Earth is Full. Full of what? I'm not sure. Right now, the planet is full of open space. There's so much space. And the idea that the Earth is full and that we're going to run out of everything doesn't really fit what we can see right in front of
No
us.
one wants to live like in North Dakota. Because it doesn't always look like that. I'll tell you that right now.
Anybody know where this is?
Narnia.
This is a painting, isn't it?
This is the state of Washington. The vast majority of the country is empty, except where it's crowded, like right around here. So I think when you look at the whole country in aggregate, there's plenty of open space. If you look at the planet in aggregate, there's plenty of open space.
Well, and the numbers are pretty staggering too. It's somewhere around like 40,000 people per square mile in a city like San Francisco versus 11 people per square mile in somewhere like South Dakota.
Right. Yeah. And we're very biased by what we see. So people who write out of San Francisco are going to think about, the population crisis. But you go to the middle of the country, and it's like wide open. There's nobody around.
Probably like 10 million dogs per square mile here, too.
So the idea...
Fuck.
So just to reiterate, so
Children.
the idea of
Excuse me,
Malthusian...
Children. I meant children, not dogs. I don't want to offend anybody.
So the idea of the Malthusian catastrophe is just that we need to keep, for the amount of people that are being born, we need to be able to sustainably be able to feed and provide resources to all of those people.
There was a concern that we'd run out of food, and so a lot of the food policies thereafter were really based on the idea that, wow, we're not going to feed everybody. But the other thing that really came out of the Malthusian concern was that we should start to control the population, which is a horrible sounding word, the idea of controlling population.
China did it.
They ended up doing it.
400 million prevented births in 35 years.
From the one child per family policy. So a lot of those governmental policies and the media campaigns were all based on Malthusian theories, and then Paul Ehrlich's book. But what actually happened? In fact, the world population growth rate has already peaked. Can anybody guess
What decade?
In the 60s, we were already at 5 billion, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, and we were pretty much at that number where Malthusian had thought that, you know what, this is pretty much where we had thought that, where he had anticipated that was it. That was the mark.
Exactly.
So he guessed. Good.
So is that a Eureka, June? Yeah?
That's correct.
Eureka! Woo!
The 1960s, the population growth rate peaked in the early part of the 1960s, for obvious reasons, as you can tell.
Boobs.
Of course, contraceptive pill was also invented right at the onset of the decade.
Oh.
Okay, so this is the growth rate of the population.
Percent year after year.
Yeah, exactly, percent
Yeah.
year after year. So you can see how it's been declining ever since the 60s. So since the 1960s, it's basically been going straight down. We're getting close to 1% growth rate, and more importantly, look at the slope of the line. So the world has been taught to be afraid of population explosion, and yet the empirical evidence is going exactly the opposite direction. So whenever the world's opinion is going this way, and the fact pattern is going the alternative path, I think we have a very interesting situation, right? What percentage of the world's population lives in countries with below replacement fertility rate?
50.
50%? Eureka!
Eureka! Woo! Congratulations!
Considering that a century ago, people were having 7 to 10 babies, with mortality rates being very high in the infancy, very high through puberty, and very high through adulthood. This is a sea change, the fact that people are having so few kids. Okay, so next question. What was the average age of the U.S. population in the 1970 census?
27.
Wow, Eureka!
Eureka!
All right, the answer is 28. I'm sorry for all the Falcons fans out there. Follow on, companion question is, what was the average age of the U.S. population in the 2010 census?
44.
And the average age now is 37. We're much older than we were 50 years ago. What are factors associated with falling fertility rates? And I put in there as listed in Wikipedia because we can all speculate, but
Wikipedia's never wrong.
Easy access to birth control. And also,
Okay.
I'm a nanny and I charge like $29 an
Do you
hour
really?
plus benefits. So it's expensive to have kids.
okay, she nailed
That's
2 of
correct.
them. Let's give her one prize.
Here's a
Yeah,
netball.
Eureka! Woo! Good
it.
job. Congratulations.
Restate what you just said so everybody else can hear it. One is the high cost of raising children. It's expensive having kids. And then the second thing, contraception. Contraception has allowed people to control their fertility. And a lot of people don't want to have kids. Yes,
All right, yes, we have an answer from over here.
Shift in priorities. A lot of people are focused on their career.
Okay, focus on careers.
I like that one.
That's also on Wikipedia.
Eureka!
Eureka!
Nipple
Woo!
time.
So education, work.
Okay,
talked about
good. You're another
very
Eureka.
expensive to raise
That's
kids.
totally true. I
All right,
agree.
who
And the
have we had?
contraception.
Got a PhD in baby making.
You got your hickling.
That was
Higher
genius.
income?
Wealth, absolutely. So wealth
Wealth?
is associated with declining
Eureka?
fertility.
Give a nipple,
Eureka!
got a
Eureka!
June, do you want to elaborate on wealth a little first? Or?
Well, so social scientists have been trying to figure out why is wealth associated with lower fertility. And one of the surprising things that they've come up with is as people basically, a lot of people had babies because they felt poor, and having babies was a way to feel the wealth. But as people get wealthier, they don't feel as much need to have something. And another theory is that people also just get more selfish when life is good, and they don't want to share that with other beings that would really do it. So there's all
fucking
sorts of
baby.
weird psychological reasons why people just, as they get wealthy, the wealthy class tends to have fewer babies.
So,
Squeeze it.
falling fertility rates because of increased access to medical care and especially lowered child death rates. So kids aren't dying of things like pneumonia or diarrhea anymore. So people are having less kids as a result.
Cultural expectation, yes, absolutely. Eureka!
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 Mortality rates were very high until the recent past. Average lifespan was 22 until 1800. infant mortality rate was sky high, and half of your siblings would die before hitting puberty. Chances are one of your parents is going to be dead by the time you hit puberty. So mortality was all around us. So you would have 7 kids with the hopes that maybe 3 would survive, right? So people used to have very high fertility, knowing that the attrition rate is very high. But the other thing is, when lifespan is 22, that's a very short window. So you become sentient, like when you're a teenager. You're 14, 15. You barely become conscious. You're like, oh my God, I'm going to die soon, right? So religion was able to step in and offer you pro forma longevity, synthetic longevity through this idea of the afterlife. So religion took hold of the population because of the fears about mortality. Now, somebody born today can expect to live 100 years. So religion is losing its power because mortality is so far off for so many people that a lot of people are just, they're becoming secularized. And so religion was one of the main drivers of promoting fertility because religions are, let's face it, they're membership economies. And they all want more members, so every major religion that's successful has built into its code have lots of kids. Catholics, Mormons. So the fact that religion is waning is actually a major cause of declining fertility rates. So let's go over the rest of these.
Quite the eureka.
I think we hit most of them. Higher education associated with careers. Economic development, they mean wealth by that, so wealthier countries have fewer kids. Urbanization, we didn't mention. Contraception, assisted reproductive technologies.
It's tag teaming.
Which...
You know what I'm saying? It's like one of us will get her pregnant.
Yeah, fuck yeah, dude.
So that's IVF, right? So knowing that you might be able to have kids later has allowed people to kind of defer that, to a different time period of one's life. Government policies, which is the one child per family kind of policy, that actually there's other models of that throughout the world. War tends to reduce fertility, separate from actually reducing population. It actually reduces fertility rates as well. This is a big one, partnership instability. So as people live longer, they tend to have serial relationships. So people know I might not be around with this person. So the commitment towards having kids is really on the decline because you're not quite sure if they're going to be around.
Yeah.
So frequency of sex is a big one. So around the world, people are having less sex. It's really incredible.
Speak for yourself, doctor.
Yeah.
Okay, so high investment per child was mentioned, and then gender roles are changing. These are all in Wikipedia.
Gender roles are changing. That's right. Transgender roles are changing.
So after the U.S. and Russia, which country offered the highest number of naturalized citizenships?
Canada.
Canada.
Eureka! And he had sex last night.
That's a double.
So as countries are facing population decline pressure, not all countries are declining yet, there's 2 ways to counter that. One is to invite more people in your country, and if you're a country like Canada, obviously you need a lot of help. Or you can do the other thing, which is to promote fertility.
The United States is still the highest.
The United States is the highest, but let's also remember these are absolute numbers. On a percentage basis, we're actually not number 1. We let the most people in, which we're known for, but on a per capita basis, countries like Sweden allowed a lot more people in relative to their population. So there's a lot more integration going on in other countries besides the United States. And interestingly, a lot of people think that Japan isn't offering a lot of citizenships, but that's actually not true. That's the myth. The reality is they're actually allowing a lot of people through. And I think the naturalization rate is something like 99%. So it's one of the easiest places to get citizenship, very counter to the reputation.
And then there's places like Bhutan where it takes 20 years to get naturalized. Or there was another place, Liechtenstein?
Liechtenstein.
That's the German.
You got to be able to say it in order to get
Liechtenstein,
citizenship.
30 years until you get naturalized.
But is that a
Boy,
good
is
country?
it worth it.
Is that like a good country?
All right, question 8. Which country instituted a national campaign that says have 3 or more children if you can afford it?
Yeah, I've recently heard that Singapore has something.
That is correct.
Oh,
Singapore!
Eureka! Woo!
All right.
Yeah.
Eureka! Eureka!
So that's the bottom line. All those blue countries, remember, it's half the world, they're starting to institute these policies to promote fertility, or they're relaxing immigration to try to attract more talent. Okay, next question. What are potential negative consequences of population decline?
A diaper shortage.
But I think that as the average age increases, you start having a higher number of net consumers than net producers. So you start having this huge deficit in resources, basically. So also, for example, there's less young people to support the old people that are already retired.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Eureka.
Eureka! Sweet.
Great answer.
Less innovation.
That's a good one. So innovation is done by the young and consumed by the old. So if the ratio of the young to old changes, we become more fixed. The mind gets in more and more stasis and fixed thinking the older we get. So as the average population rises, as a net, we become less innovative. That's, we trade off for wisdom, but that's one of the concerns that's out there. Eureka for that one.
Eureka. What is this, June?
This is actually the population stack of Finland, but I think it's generalizable to a lot of those blue countries. So what we've seen is a great transition from 100 years ago to now, 100 years ago
Wow.
on the left to the right. So this is what the population stack looks like. Young people on the bottom, old people on the top. You can see how the shape of it has changed, right? So you could imagine an old world where young people could put money into Social Security, and then there's not that many people collecting. So now that it's like this, it's now finally being revealed as a, quote, Ponzi scheme, because there's not enough people funding all those pension funds and Social Security, and so many people waiting to collect. So this is a calamity in waiting.
How many years out are we from that kind of error? Oops.
Some people think we're already in it now. Right, so I think this is looming right now, and the forecast for this shape changing is incredible. You should look at like the forecast for China in like 2050. Like quarter of the population is going to be above 65 years old. I mean, the rooms are going to get gray.
Too much.
Wow.
Okay.
Too much Coke spermicide.
And you kind of alluded to this.
Best
So
response ever.
when you have a lot of old people and not enough young people.
Is that a Honda Osimo taking care of it in the
that
background?
actually is a robot, right?
This robot's about to kill this poor old man.
Yeah. This is before the Matrix.
I mean, we're so worried about, hey, do we have enough jobs? But in fact, the future worry may be, do we have enough workers? We might have a complete different kind of labor problem where we can't find people to do the work. And so we're probably going to see the rise of robots because there's so many jobs you just can't fill. If you go to Japan right now, so many of the service jobs, like cleaning your house, are done by robots. They just can't find people to do the work. So this is going to be a major crisis if there's older people need more help and there's not enough young people. So the rise of robots is being presaged by...
Why we can't have a wall, you guys.
Yeah, man, we got to make room for the
Somebody
Mexican
was thinking it, I
robots.
just
We
said
got to
it.
make...
That's exactly right. So we're going to eventually fight to keep people in, not keep people out. Okay. So that's, as people get older, they get more conservative, right? When we're young, more liberal, and as we get older, we tend to get more conservative, not only in terms of our thinking, but even our political disposition. So the direction of the world right now, given the aging population that nobody talks about, is the fact that politically we're becoming more conservative. This is I was trying to depict the grand old party, right?
Uh-huh.
So this is something to be really mindful of as we think about the future of the world, is just the political disposition of all these different countries, what's going to happen. So I think it's negative or positive depending on your point of view. I think in San Francisco, people would consider that a net negative. Okay. So number 10.
Ooh.
What are potential positive consequences of population decline? We're going to listen to maybe 5 answers, and we'll give the prize to the best answer.
More for me.
The more for me.
More for me. Okay, great. Okay, that's a great answer.
More for
That's
you,
not a
what?
Eureka.
More what?
I don't have to force myself into a BART train during commute hours.
Hell yeah.
Wow.
I think that this will actually put positive pressure on how we think about what makes people valuable, because right now we put a lot of value on people's work productivity, and the increasing average age of the world will make us question that and maybe move us towards a different global model of what it means to be a valuable
What it means to be a
person.
human. Yes,
Yeah.
okay,
Wow.
great one.
Well, that was so
Good answer.
yeah,
Good answer.
inspirational.
The argument against longevity that the world is overcrowded is wrong.
Yep.
More brilliant minds that figure this shit out.
Damn.
Drop that
son.
mic, sir.
Yeah, drop that mic.
A relief for the environment.
Relief in the environment, absolutely.
Higher income per capita means less environmental degradation.
Okay, environmental degradation.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
So, one more. Okay.
I'm going to say, like, I know we said innovation, like less innovation was a negative consequence of population decline, but I think it's going to be better because it forces us to sink or swim. We have to figure out how to live as we do now with less people.
Lower rents in San Francisco, too.
Lower
Like,
rents in
let's
San
just
Francisco.
knock
Both of
it
those.
down.
They're
All
all
right.
great answers.
Yeah,
all
they
great
were.
answers. So, Eureka to human values.
Human values.
Human values. Yeah. All right,
Eureka.
June. Why values over
Yeah,
things like
so-
environment?
Well, they're all good. So let's just kind of catalog the things that we're already seeing as a result of the demographic transition. Some of which we're seeing, some of which we're about to see. So, and nobody mentioned this, but this whole idea of war and war over natural resources, war over oil, right? War is insane anyway. But when you think about what war is, right? So what we just described is, it's actually not, we're running out of people, not just running out of oil. So the idea of killing each other for oil is insane because you're reducing each other's most precious resources, which is people, right? War is always crazy anyway. But I think we'll finally realize that war is truly ridiculous because people are so scarce. We're declining in population, and the idea of like reducing each other's human resources is a race to the bottom. So people talked about BART, housing in
talked about
San
homes.
Francisco,
Yep.
tickets to the 49ers. I mean, everything's going to get much easier because more for me, right? When everything, when there's
I just
fewer
think
and
no one
fewer
wants
people.
to sit by these people.
Isn't this a picture of somebody at the inauguration?
Oh, aha.
That's what it is, I think.
There's a ton
You're
of stuff out
lip-syncing.
there, and
Total
fewer and fewer people. There's more for me, and there's less stress on infrastructure. That's an amazing thing, right? Compared to the direction we've been heading, which is more and more stress on all the infrastructure that we have. When there's fewer and fewer buyers for the same amount of stuff, what happens to the price?
Gets deflated.
Deflated, right. So deflation is a terrible sounding word, right? Because it's very deflating. So a much better way to describe deflation, a more positive way, is to talk about increased purchasing power. So what this means is, as there's deflationary force because of declining demand, that means that your money goes further. So deflation actually is a wonderful thing, the fact that we get more for our money. Now, everybody's terrified of it because there's all sorts of secondary issues. We're not set up for deflation. But if you find a way economically to handle deflation, it is incredible that things get cheaper and cheaper for all of us, right? In fact, when there's so much stuff, and it gets to the point where there's not enough people, all this excess inventory is going to start creating a shared economy. So depopulation or population stabilization predicts and presages the rise of all these shared economy companies. There's way too much of everything, as it turns out, right? We're going to share our cars. We're going to share our buildings. Who knows what we're going to share? So population stabilization is going to drive us towards this collaborative economy rather than this hoarding economy.
I use Lyft, by the way, because I'm
I was going
woke.
to say, like, doctor, that should be a Lyft, not an Uber.
I'm woke. I use Lyft.
We're out. Oh, yeah, so do I.
Sorry, the reference.
Okay, so, and then this whole idea of people. So people, when we're going to wake up one day and realize the scarcest resource isn't like gold, oil, water, all the stuff you've been told by the media. The scarcest resource is going to be people. So we're in the human century. We're in the talent century. This whole idea of like blocking people from coming in is going to look insane. We're going to try to be the best country possible so we attract people. The whole idea of immigration is going to be, how do we service people better? Right? So this is going to redefine what it means to be what it means to be human. It's going to dramatically raise the value of a human being, and I think we're already seeing that now. We value people more than we've ever done before, and we're not just talking about companies. Companies do this, right? But we're going to be doing it at the national level. I picked the sunflower because I want people to be optimistic, because the future is going to be much sunnier than what any of the media articles told us, right? We're not heading towards dystopia.
Yeah.
We're not heading towards calamity. We're heading towards an incredible world, right? Where, I mean, the environment, when you start running out of people, the environment's going to heal itself. I mean, we're so terrified of all these things like global warming trend, and we should be mindful of those things. I'm so glad we're conscious. But as population stabilizes, we're going to be able to finally get ahead of this whole, whole war against all the damage that we're doing to the environment. Because the environment is a self-healing system. The only thing I will say is that this scenario is priced at zero. People aren't talking about this. So it may or may not happen, but the prevailing wisdom is that we're going to overpopulate and ruin the world. So just know that this scenario is on the table. We don't know when, we don't know how likely, but if it happens, it's going to fundamentally change everything, and most people will not have been ready for that world, and it's a pretty good world.
We usually foster Eureka moments for our audience, so we will now ask Joon, how about you? Have you had a Eureka moment, maybe about population stabilization, maybe about something else that you could share with us?
So my personal insight on
That
population
question
stabilization is, and this relates to our field, Justin, is that as the average age rises, everything is going to become less scarce, more abundant, more for me, with the exception of healthcare. So the one thing that I think in this decreasing scarcity world that's actually going to become more scarce is healthcare. So I think we also need to be mindful that we need to dramatically increase the number of medical school spots, because after 40 is when we really start needing healthcare. Before then, your body is the healthcare system, and it's after 40 you need it. Like, think about what's happened. Now that we can mass produce everything, there's no line for most things. Right? I mean, how many things do you need a line for? You just go to Amazon and you buy it, right? What's the one industry where there's a line everywhere?
Fucking open mics in San Francisco.
Yeah. That and brunch in San Francisco.
Yeah, oh my God.
I heard a story from an entrepreneur who went to Eastern Europe after the fall of Berlin Wall. And his genius idea was, oh my God, nobody here is doing any marketing. I'll just clean up. I'll market, and I'll take over all the retail. And the entrepreneurs and the business owners in Eastern Europe are like, are you stupid? Why would you advertise? That just costs money. Look at the lines. We have no product, and we have so much demand. You guys in America have so much of everything and no demand. That's why you got to go market. So he came back with his tail between his knees and said, you know what? What's the one area in America where there's a line? He said, I got to get into healthcare. Pharmacy, you're waiting in a line. You go to a medical doctor, you're waiting in a line. In fact, we've institutionalized the idea of a waiting room. What other industry has a waiting room, right? DMV, okay.
Oh,
the government, government industry. And then there's
evil institution.
MRI is going to take you weeks, and God forbid you have a medical emergency, you're bleeding out of your face, you're still waiting in line.
So with people like you that are restoring homeostatic capacity and providing the Paul Longevity Prize and Aubrey de Grey with the aging, so the idea of this is you live in a developed world and you, over time, figure out how to live longer, prolong lifespan until 150, 250. Then what happens to things like population stabilization if we're living so long? Let's say we get the right healthcare tools in place and we live a long time. But then I have 2 kids and then they have 2 kids, but we're all still alive. So can you touch base on that?
I mean, so far we haven't seen that scenario. I think Alan's referring to this scenario where if people live a whole lot longer and there's fewer people dying in general, will the population reinflate? And that's entirely possible. We don't know. But the empirical fact pattern to date is every country that's been experiencing longevity is falling in populations. We've seen no exception to date. Going forward, we don't know what it's going to look like.
Okay, let's give it up for Joon Yun, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Joon.
Let's give it up for that.